Good morning, everybody. It is currently 1:20 a.m. and we are recording the second episode of the NoPrep Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm here with Brady.
What is
I'm
up?
Carter, your host.
Tom
I'm on Twitter.
could not be here
Yes, Tom.
because he died. So he'll be back next
So
episode though, hopefully.
as we said, it's 1:20 in the morning, so he
Yeah.
decided to
He
dip on
decided
this
to
one.
exactly. But yeah, again, 1:20 in the morning. Welcome back to another episode. Thank you so much for the support on episode 1. Y'all are going crazy, running up, like, subscribe,
All
comment.
yeah, all four of you. I think that's the estimated number that have actually listened to it so far.
To all our
So we
Spotify
got Brady
listeners,
here.
also welcome. How are we doing?
Yeah.
But yeah, all right. So we've got me and Carter just going on today. So as you can see on the left side of our screen, we've got a mock draft today. This was just a mock draft that Carter did that we thought we'd be analyzing. So I wasn't in this mock because I wanted to figure it out and look at it for the first time myself and kind of show an outsider's perspective in, while Carter actually being in the mock can take us through his perspective of picking. So with that said, Carter, first of all, let's break down your team a bit. What were you looking for when you hit this team?
Um, Well, I would have hoped to get not Michael Thomas in the first round, but the first six guys decided to take running backs. So I was left with a choice between Nick Chubb, Joe Mixon, or Michael Thomas.
Yeah, and
And
that's
as
Michael
as you can
Thomas
see,
by far.
yeah, that's an easy choice right there, Michael Thomas.
Picking from the 7th spot, in my opinion, is pretty good. Honestly, picking top 8, in my opinion, is fine because you get a top 6 running back who are all solid or a top 2 receiver. And then Tyreek, essentially just picking anywhere except for 10 because there are 9 players that I like, and then I think there's a cutoff after that. So picking top 9, in my opinion, is good.
I like to pick. I'd take top 4. The 7 was okay. I like this draft, but I think I got really lucky in terms
hmm
of who I was able to grab off the board.
I think being able to go further down the board, I think there's a lot of talent that's hitting the back end that's essentially the same as the front end of the second round. So I think that higher payoff for drafting early is worth it this year.
That's true. There is some fall off though. I mean, people are taking some guys way too high, so you can even get people in like the third round that should be going up to
Yeah, the
at
first
least.
prime example of this would be Allen Robinson as the 4th pick in the second round. What was this guy thinking with wide receivers like Julio Jones, Chris Godwin, Kenny Galladay, and Mike Evans on the board? In my opinion, all 4 of these receivers are going to have better fantasy years than Allen Robinson. And Allen Robinson as the wide receiver 5 off the board is a little intriguing to say the least in my book.
Yeah, so going before him, we had Michael Thomas, Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, and DeAndre Hopkins, all of whom should go before Allen Robinson. But seeing him go before Julio Jones and Chris Godwin, especially, that really
Yeah.
confused me.
hmm
I wasn't too worried about it because I needed a running back, so I wasn't looking at wide receivers particularly there. I didn't really notice that until Brady actually pointed it out while we were reviewing over this.
Just
But
briefly
I don't
looking.
I don't understand that pick there.
And then also, I see in the second round you went running back. Aaron Jones, you're not really going to go wrong with him. I mean, with people like Josh Jacobs and Chris Carson on the board, I mean, those both would have been solid. But at the end of the day, the Green Bay Packers have a good O-line. He's going to get a lot of work. I can't fault you for that pick.
Yeah, so it was either Aaron Jones or Josh Jacobs there, and I've gone Josh Jacobs in a lot of other drafts. I wanted to kind of diversify this, so hopefully you won't really see me taking too many similar guys as if you listen to episode 1 or watch episode 1. We did a mock draft there. I tried to diversify what I took. So that's why Josh Jacobs there. I chose Aaron Jones. You want to
Then
diversify your stocks and players as much as you can.
Exactly. Then from the back end, in round 3, you went Melvin Gordon. Now, that's a new situation in Denver. I think it's going to work out pretty well. But what are your thoughts when you picked him in the 3rd?
Also, you look two picks before him. Todd Gurley went. I would have preferred to get Todd Gurley there, but that was just went too early for me to grab him.
Why did you
So Melvin
select?
Gordon.
Why did you select Gordon over Thielen or AJ Brown, or even Odell for that matter?
I don't think Thielen's gonna see the same production he's been seeing in years past. Look
I
at
think if
the
I were in,
guys like
I think if I
Stephon Diggs
were, oh my bad.
left, and I think that's gonna the defenses that the Vikings will face this season are going to focus on Thielen a lot more now that Diggs isn't contending for his targets. So he'll see a reduction in production is my
In my
projection.
opinion, I would have probably taken Jonathan Taylor here in the third round, even though you almost could have gotten him in the fourth. He's going to be running behind, my opinion, the best offensive line in the NFL. I like him more than Ingram, Fournette, Connor, and honestly Melvin Gordon. I think Jonathan Taylor would have been the best pick here.
The issue with Jonathan Taylor is he's still got to share his carries with Marlon Mack. You look at Melvin Gordon, he's going to be a offense that will be looking to rely on the run a little bit more. Drew Lock is going to be his first year as a full-time starter. So I think they'll turn to both Patrick Lindsey and Melvin Gordon more than the Colts will look to both Jonathan Taylor and Marlon Mack. And I think that Jonathan Taylor is going to get short end of the stick this year when it comes to carries compared to Marlon Mack. I think that next year, if you're drafting Dynasty, you're obviously going for Jonathan Taylor. But
Yeah.
this year, he's not the guy that you want to be looking at. Like fourth round, too high. You can get, so Le'Veon Bell went after him, David Johnson, Devin Singletary, Raheem Mostert all went after him.
I
I'd
personally think
say
David Johnson
all of
went
those
way
guys,
too high here.
he probably did, but all of those guys that I just named, except for Raheem Mostert, would probably take over Jonathan Taylor.
So clearly, we value Jonathan Taylor differently. I think he's going to be the back in Indianapolis, and with that O line, I think he's going to thrive in that system. But looking at you in the fourth round, you pulled kind of what I did last draft and take Calvin Ridley, and Calvin Ridley is by far the best pick there. He's the best receiver on the board, and with you only having Michael Thomas, pulling the trigger on Calvin Ridley is a solid option.
Yeah, especially with how far DJ Chark then fell, he fell to one pick before my fifth round pick. So I would have hoped to grab him because I like DJ Chark a lot. Uh, Jacksonville's going to be playing from behind, and they're going to throw. Gardner Mitchell's going to find DJ Chark open quite a bit. But at that point, Calvin Ridley was the choice for
Mm-hmm.
me.
Now
I think
the
that
first
that
questionable
wide receiving core in Atlanta is
Atlanta.
going to do very well.
Yeah. Now the first questionable pick of the draft from Carter's End in round 5. Why Russell Wilson ahead of Kyler Murray?
He's a better quarterback.
But look at the fantasy production, though. I think in general Russell Wilson's a better quarterback, but with Kyler Murray being a top 10 quarterback last year and giving him the best receiver in talent-wise in football with another year under his belt and experience, I think Kyler Murray is going to produce better than Russell Wilson this year. I think right there Kyler Murray's the pick.
DeAndre Hopkins isn't the most talented wide receiver in football, though.
Look at his drop stats. Literally, the man hasn't dropped the ball in like a year and a half or something crazy like that.
Yeah,
Like
but
if you
drop
throw it
doesn't.
to him, he will catch it. And you see him producing it at like one of the best receivers last year in fantasy football. You give that offense, you give Kyler Murray a guy like him who's an extreme upgrade over any receiver they had last year. I think he's going to do a lot better fantasy wise. And from a top 10 quarterback that he already was like in the process, I think Kyler Murray is the pick ahead of Russell Wilson there.
I think that between Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, and a guy like Chris Carson in the backfield for Russell Wilson, he's going to perform better than Kyler Murray. DeAndre Hopkins obviously good. I don't think he's the best quarterback or best wide receiver in the NFL.
Talent
Up there,
wise, I'd say
obviously.
he is. Fantasy wise, he's not.
I don't even think talent wise. I'd
Really?
take a guy like Tyreek Hill, that speed, or a guy like Julio Jones. Julio Jones is just a better receiver than DeAndre
Honestly,
Hopkins.
honestly, when you look at talent wise, I feel like the top 5 in no particular order are Michael Thomas, Devontae Adams, Julio Jones, Kenny Galladay, and then DeAndre Hopkins. Just in terms of like being able to go up and get balls, having the physical assets, and then having a decent quarterback behind them. When you put a top 5 talent level receiver of post on any quarterback, he's going to get better as a quarterback for fantasy production. And the fact that Kyler Murray was already performing at a high level, I think, is only going to explode his fantasy value and potentially be a QB3 behind Mahomes and Lamar this year.
You say Kyler Murray, he's going to benefit from getting DeAndre Hopkins. His fantasy value is going to, go up a lot or whatever. But Russell Wilson's fantasy value is already up there. It's
But like,
I mean,
what are
so
the
Kyler
improvements
Murray,
from last year?
Kyler Murray was a was quarterback 8 last year. He was the 8th ranked quarterback in fantasy production.
Hmm.
And Russell Wilson was the Russell Wilson was the 3rd ranked quarterback in fantasy production last year.
But then you got to look at the upside of giving DeAndre
I
Hopkins
do not
another.
see DeAndre Hopkins causing Kyler Murray to jump 5 in the rankings.
But see,
That's just not going to happen.
I think that DK Metcalf's second year will help Russell Wilson, but I think DeAndre Hopkins is that talented of a receiver. Anyway, moving on, because we've probably talked about those quarterbacks a little too much, and to be honest, like, they're both going to be solid QB1s anyway. Stephon Diggs in round 6, I'd say, is by far the best pick here. And honestly, you see a really big fall off after Diggs in round 6, like pretty substantially.
Yeah, I couldn't believe that Diggs was still available here, honestly. I think that the move to Buffalo is causing a lot of people to pass on him when they shouldn't be. I mean, Josh Allen, he's had his struggles, but people in the league think he's good.
At the end of the
I,
day, Josh Allen is a better quarterback than Kirk Cousins. And the Buffalo Bills, in my opinion, have a better offense and a better secondary cast than the Minnesota Vikings did, with the exception of Dalvin Cook. However, I think that because Josh Allen has a cannon, because Josh Allen can throw the ball 60, 70 yards, Stephon Diggs will benefit a lot because of that. And I think people are very overlooking that. And
yeah,
also, he doesn't need
exactly.
to split catches with Adam Thielen as much, which I think will increase his fantasy value. And just with Josh Allen being that much better of a quarterback. However, Darren Waller going one pick before, that's got to suck, because I'd say he would be a perfect steal for that value. And I think he's a really good pick for where he went.
If Even if Darren Waller hadn't gone there, the window for getting that good of a tight end had closed. I don't think that. So in terms of tight ends, you've got Travis Kelsey, George Kittle, and Mark Andrews. Those are the top 3 guys that should be going like first 4 rounds. After that, Zach Ertz, yes, bit of a worry there. They brought in Goddard. I mean, he's been getting some mentions.
Zach Ertz has
Uh,
been so solid for so long,
yeah,
though.
no, and I don't disagree. I think he's your round 4 through 6 sort of guy.
Hmm.
Then Darren Waller in round 6. That's a bit early for me. I'm perfectly fine for waiting plenty of rounds to get a guy like T.J. Hawkinson or Noah Fant. Now, just a note: T.J. Hawkinson just went on the COVID list for the Lions. That does not mean that he has COVID. It just means that he either has it or came in close contact with someone else who has it. So he'll be out for at least part of training camp, I think.
He should be
But
fine before the season starts, though.
exactly. So a guy like, I'm not super high on Evan Ingram, but if you can get him in like the 10th round, you can get T.J. Hawkinson in the 11th. Noah Fant, guys like Goddard also. I'm fine with that and passing Darren Waller to get a guy like Stephon Diggs. So
I
even if Darren Waller was available at that pick, which he wasn't, but even if he had
Yeah.
been, I'm still taking Diggs at that pick.
See, here's the way I look at tight ends. You've got the top 3 tight ends, the tier 1s. You've got Travis Kelsey, George Kittle, and Mark Andrews. Those are by far the top 3 tight ends and should be picked in that order, if I'm being honest. Then you've got tier 2, and I would say this consists of Zach Ertz and Darren Waller. You can make a case for Tyler Higbee, but I'd really say Tyler Higbee is like the high end of tier 3. But I'd say that drop off from tier 2 to tier 3 is significant enough to definitely make a case for Darren Waller above Stephon Diggs, especially with the depth of wide receivers this year. You bring up how tight ends are so deep, but like at the end of the day, wide receivers are too. You're getting guys like Jerry Jeudy, Mike Williams is going deep, Emmanuel Sanders is going deep, Justin Jefferson, Michael Pittman Jr. The rookie class of wide receivers is loaded this year, and because all of them are unproven, I'd say a few of them are bound to break out in extremely high fantasy production.
I don't disagree that receivers are deeper. I'm also not saying that tight ends are deep. It's not that they're deep. It's that there are guys that you can pick. You can pick off in the late rounds that are going to be good. Specific guys like, I'm not saying go out draft Jack Doyle, go out draft Mike Gesicki. Don't draft those guys. You got to have your strategy set for tight end from the start of the draft. You got to either look at your second round and be like, I can take George Kittle there and I'll be okay. Or your third round, I'd be like, I can take Mark Andrews with my third round pick. He will be there and I can get him. Or you have to plant, you have to take all your other positions. Then you have to make sure that you get a guy like Rob Gronkowski, who is normally going pretty late in drafts. T.J. Hawkinson, Noah Fant, or Dallas Goedert.
The
You
way I look at tight ends is unless like the perfect tight end falls to me at the perfect spot, like say I'm picking like third or fourth and Kittle's there in round 3, or say I'm picking like first or second and Kelsey's there in round 2 or 3, or say I'm picking like ninth or 10th in round 3 and Mark Andrews is there. Like I feel like that like there has to be like the perfect fit for tight end in order for me to pick one. So in other words, unless a tight end isn't the best position or player available on the board, more often than not, I'm going to be waiting on tight ends. However, if they're
Yeah,
available and they're the best
exactly.
player on the board, I'm picking them.
Exactly. And for me, Darren Waller would not have been the best player on the board, even if he had fallen to that pick. It still would have been Stephon Diggs.
See, that's where I disagree. I think,
Actually,
I think,
actually, I think Deshaun Watson would have been the best player on the board, but I already had a
well,
quarterback,
yeah,
so I wasn't
obviously.
going to pick him. Yeah,
Yeah, I'd say on that, Darren Waller is the best player on the board. And yeah, I don't like Tyler Higbee going before Darren Waller, though. I will
yeah.
say that.
Neither do I. Neither do I.
Now looking at round 7, Hunter Henry, solid tight end. Can't really go wrong there.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I kind of I preached all that wait to take a tight end, and then I took Hunter Henry, obviously.
Who's solid?
Um.
Round 8, you
Yeah,
go with
it's a
Ronald
solid pick. I
Jones.
should have.
Pretty
Yeah.
high upside guy. And I'm looking at more of the running backs, and this is where running backs really start to fall off. So now it's kind of take your pick on who you think is going to do well. So I'm not going to fault you for taking Ronald Jones because obviously, like, he's solid.
Yeah. So the running back that went before him was Kerryon Johnson. Obviously, would have preferred to have Kerryon Johnson to Ronald Jones,
Mm-hmm.
despite the injury risk. I'm still taking Kerryon Johnson there.
That's fair.
I could have taken J.K. Dobbins. I thought about it. He was the next running back to go off the board a couple of picks later. Thought
Mm-hmm.
about it, but it's a coin flip there. Philip Lindsay also could have taken him, but I wasn't looking to have the Melvin Gordon and Philip Lindsay duo. There's
Okay.
some you could say handcuff him or whatever, but it's just you're limiting your production there
That's fair.
significantly.
So here's my thought in round 9. I don't like the Aaron Rodgers pick, and it's not even because I don't like Aaron Rodgers as a quarterback, even though I don't. The reason that I don't like this pick is because you have an established quarterback in Russell Wilson. You know he's going to get his snaps. You know he's going to be a good quarterback one pending injury, and like you know what you're getting. If I have someone as solid as Russell Wilson, I'm not taking someone as solid as Aaron Rodgers. I'm taking a lower end quarterback with high upside. I feel like quarterbacks like Drew Lock, Cam Newton, even Baker Mayfield have higher upside than Aaron Rodgers. And that's why I'd take like a low ranked but high upside guy. And when I'm drafting my backup quarterback, I'm drafting on potential to be good and not how established they are already. That was me with Lamar Jackson last year. That was me with Patrick Mahomes in 2018. When I'm looking for a backup quarterback, I look at who has the potential to be a top 5 quarterback. I'm not looking at who's established.
My take on backup quarterbacks is very different. I'm a firm believer that quarterbacks in fantasy football are the make or break position. You can say, oh yeah, they're not as valuable. Don't take them very high. Obviously, yeah, you don't want to draft unless if it's Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson sort of situation. You don't want to draft them first 4 rounds, but they will make or break your season. If you have so that's my thinking there. I have Russell Wilson, but what if something happens to Russell Wilson, especially this year? He gets COVID, he gets injured just normally. Aaron Rodgers is a solid if you want to win a championship, Aaron Rodgers will do that for you just as much as Russell Wilson will. But a guy like Cam Newton, that's a big question mark. Maybe he plays well in New England, maybe he doesn't. Drew Lock, I think he's gonna do fine, but in the context that you were talking about him, that's a sketchy pick there. I just I take my quarterbacks. I prefer that they are proven
Mm-hmm.
because I need production out of them. If I'm not getting production out of my quarterbacks, I'm not gonna win the league. It's how I've I've played fantasy for
That's
the
fair.
entire time I've played fantasy, and
And
it's
granted,
worked out well for me.
I have a biased perspective because the last 2 years I've drafted at backup quarterback, I've drafted Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes as my backup. So both the years they've hit for me,
Dude,
which means like I'm more likely to like try and take high upside guys because I've had that success in the past. Like that's how I've won leagues. But honestly, in round 9,
yeah,
I'm the way I'm looking at it, I would honestly like you got Aaron Rodgers, you got Tom Brady, you got Tannehill, like you have quarterbacks. So what I would have done here is I would have probably either taken Jerry Jeudy or Deontay Johnson. I like those two picks there opposed to Aaron Rodgers. I would have waited a little longer to take a backup quarterback and just improve in depth at wide receiver.
Could have taken Jerry Judy. I would not have taken Deontay Johnson. Jerry
I
Judy
like
would have
Deontay
been
Johnson.
an
I
okay
think
pick.
Deontay Johnson is going to have the Juju Smith-Schuster role that Juju had when Antonio Brown was the wide receiver one on the Steelers.
Last year just took all the faith out of the Steelers offense that I had. The Steelers offense
Except keep
was
in mind,
my
Big Ben is back
favorite.
this year. Big Ben is back
Yeah,
this year.
but I have no confidence that anything can be solidified there after what happened with Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown,
Miles
the
Garrett.
the whole yeah the whole well that's something else. But with Le'Veon Bell and Antonio, that offense was so good, and the fact that couldn't, I mean, that was a offense that could have won a Super Bowl probably,
Mhm.
and the fact that they had a falling out, that just makes me worried, and obviously,
But I mean,
I guess
again,
not obviously,
at
I don't know what the issue was,
again, you could have
and
gotten either of these guys in round 10 too. And I look at like wide receiver 4 or 5. Like I look at the way I look at like my backups is I look at people with potential. If I know I have established starters, I'm looking at people who have a lower floor but a higher ceiling. And those two being Jerry Jeudy and Deontay Johnson, I think they both have potential to be high-end wide receiver twos. Now, will they? Potentially not, but I think that's their ceiling. I would say that they both have higher ceilings than Brandon Cooks, and so you could have gotten one or even both of them if you wanted to.
yeah, I could have tried to grab. I still wouldn't have taken Deontay Johnson.
That's
I
fair.
probably will never draft him this year. Brandon Cooks was a guy that I looked at. I was like, this guy, he'll give me production. Jerry Jeudy is a huge question mark. He obviously got a lot of upside, but I'm looking for that production, especially with a team where, I mean, Calvin Ridley. That's kind of a risk there. You don't know that he's going to produce as well as everyone's saying that he's going to
He's a
produce.
solid wide receiver two there, though.
Yeah,
Same
but
with Jerry Jeudy and Deontay Johnson, both solid wide receiver twos in their respective
oh,
systems.
yeah, obviously Calvin Ridley's much more valuable as a wide
Yeah,
receiver too. But I mean, he's been hyped up quite a bit, but he's not finished very well in terms of wide. He was wide receiver 22 in PPR in 2018, and in 2019 he was wide receiver 27 for PPR. He's about four ranks better for standard scoring each year, but
which
that
is
doesn't
low
that
end wide
doesn't
receiver two, which is what you're looking for in
yeah.
round four.
Well, 2018 was low end wide receiver 2. 2019 was high end wide receiver 3.
Okay.
That that pick though, where I took him, I want a guy. I mean, because I could have gotten a guy like DK Metcalf or Keenan Allen or someone that or DJ Chark that will definitely be a wide receiver 2. And
Hmm.
so taking the risk there, you come back to my. I mean, I took Stephon Diggs. That's a little bit of a risk. He's going to produce,
Yeah,
but coming back to my backup to get my bench wide receivers, I wanted a guy who was going to.
that's
They
fair.
might
And
not be the
Brandon Cooks
best. The
is
best.
pretty proven.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm. So now let's look at the last 5 picks, 11 through 15. I like the TJ Hawkinson pick, backup tight end with top 5 tight end potential written all over him. I like that high upside
Like,
pick. Mike Williams, I'd say a solid pick for where you got him. Again, another high upside receiver potential who is a jump ball threat. Tariq Cohen, I mean, I probably would have taken somebody else. I probably would have gone. I probably would have gone Alexander Madsen, but I mean, again, it's like really take your pick here. If you like Tariq Cohen, you like him, and he's solid for depth. However, my favorite
yeah,
pick in these late rounds is the Seattle Seahawks defense. I really like that pick. With Jamal Adams, they now have an established top 5 secondary in the league. I think they're going to get a lot of interceptions, force a lot of fumbles, and produce a lot of fantasy points. So I really like that pick.
yeah. So that was this draft I did for a few days ago. I'm not actually sure how many days. It was right after Jamal Adams, the news had come out that he was going to Seattle. So when they fell to me, the middle of the 14th round, definitely going to take them for the defense. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, in terms of you look at defenses that went after Indianapolis, Seattle's better.
Even when you look at defenses
Denver,
that went before, I'd say with the
yeah,
addition of
even
Jamal Adams, Seattle now has a
yeah,
top 5 defense in the league.
yeah, probably.
Fantasy
Maybe
wise, that secondary
yeah,
is going to force a lot of takeaways, and Jamal Adams himself is probably going to force 3 or 4 fumbles alone this year.
yeah. That's the hope.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's going to be very fantasy production. And then, I mean, kicker, like, Eric, again, take your pick. Matt Gay's solid.
Yeah. So Matt Gay. Well, my thing with kickers, actually, I've got a thing about kickers. You got to find an offense that's going to score a lot. It
Yeah,
doesn't really matter, your kicker might be good, might be bad, but you look at Tampa Bay, they're going to score a lot.
yeah.
You've got Chris Godwin, you've got Mike Evans, you've got Tom Brady, you've got Rob Gronkowski. They're going to score a lot. So Matt Gay is going to get his numbers.
You
Whereas,
look
like
at
taking someone
kickers.
like
You look.
Jake Elliott
Mhm.
or Kamai Fairbairn, those are riskier picks because you don't know how those offenses
They're
are going to do.
solid kickers themselves, probably both more
Exactly.
talented than Matt Gay at the position. But again, I agree with you. You need to pick the kicker that's going to get the most opportunities to put the ball in between the
Yeah.
posts. And
Yeah,
Matt
so
Gay's going to get you that.
everyone will take a dump on like having kickers in your fantasy league or whatever. But I think there's actually a decent strategy to it
There is.
in terms of you gotta find it's more about the offense than the kicker themselves.
So now about the overall mock, and to wrap things up with the mock, I think you got the best team here. I really like your team. I think you're deep. I think your starters are good, and I know Yahoo really liked your team too. If I ended up with this team
Yeah.
pending, and I mean this is before like any big news from any of these guys hits. So like say Calvin Ridley gets COVID, we have no way of saying that, or like say Aaron Jones says he's going to sit out, we have no way of saying that. So from this date, I like it. I like this team.
Yeah, so Yahoo, just to give a bit of perspective, I don't really trust their ratings or whatever. Jeff, they actually liked me, 95 out of 100. But throughout the entire league, they said my team was number one overall, number two overall for starters, and number two overall for bench. So I kind of just split the difference. Got number two on both, but then ended up with number one overall. Apparently,
Okay,
I think
I
that's
agree
for
with that.
projected points. Yeah,
So
I
now
think yeah.
away from the mock and on to today's division. Today we're going to be breaking down the NFC North, those teams being the Vikings, the Bears, the Packers, and the Lions. So yeah, we're going to be breaking down fantasy value. We're going to be going over some of the lesser known things like offensive line and then even their secondary. And then we're just going to be talking about how we like those teams matching up against each other. So
Right, yeah. So
want to drop some records? What do you
So
think?
Brady did a lot of research into this. So I'm gonna try to lead him through in terms of how he led me through the mock draft. So first, Brady, let's take a look at your team, the Detroit Lions. I know
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to stay unbiased, but obviously it's been questionable at best to this point. So let's see your take on the running back situation in Detroit between DeAndre Swift and Kerryon Johnson.
I actually like the running back system in Detroit, and this is going to be a little biased because I am a diehard Lions fan. However, I really like this backfield. The thing about Kerryon Johnson and is that he's never been able to stay healthy. So with DeAndre Swift getting his workload essentially decreased a little bit, I think it's going to have a nice 1-2 punch for Detroit. I think DeAndre Swift, him being able to outrun you from goal line to goal line as well as from sideline to sideline, I think is going to be very beneficial. And I think that he's going to complement Kerryon Johnson very well in that actual system. Now, for fantasy value, I think DeAndre Swift is going to be the better back of the two. However, his fantasy value does get hurt by Kerryon Johnson. So when we talk about league productivity, I think him and Kerryon together are going to do a lot better than they will in fantasy productivity.
Right. So who do you think will be the lead back there? You thinking Kerryon Johnson?
I'd say
Gonna be
Kerryon Johnson in weeks 1 through 4. And then once DeAndre Swift starts getting a groove into things, I think that's when he's going to start being the lead back. So potentially by week 5 or 6, DeAndre Swift is going to be the lead back.
okay. Excuse me. Moving a little bit in front of the running backs, offensive line for the Lions. How's it looking?
So the Detroit Lions offensive line, in my opinion, they've got a mid-tier offensive line. We've got Frank Ragnow at center or guard, depending on where he plays, Joe Dahl, and then a guy whose name I'm not even going to try to pronounce is the right tackle. Frank Ragnow and Joe Dahl are both going to be solid. The loss of Graham Glasgow to free agency is a little bad, but I'd say Detroit's going to have a mid-tier offensive line. I'd say right in the middle of the pack from 15th to they could be anywhere as like a fringe top 10 O line or a down top 20 O line. So I'd say I just put him at 15 or 16. But that's my personal opinion. Frank Ragnow, I think, is going to be a very solid offensive lineman, maybe even the top 10 O lineman in the league, because like he's been developing really well ever since we got him in the first round. And yeah, I think our offensive line is going to be pretty solid this year. And I think that's going to complement passing and running, as we say. However, I think there could be a little falling out. Say Joe Dahl doesn't produce. Say the right tackle we just got doesn't produce that much. Or say Glam Gausko really hurts us offensively because he left or is currently in free agency. I don't know if he's gone yet. I don't really know his status. It's the offensive line's a bit of a question mark, but I'd say there's still going to be a mid-tier offensive line. Nothing special, nothing horrible.
All right, so the Lions have got you say it's a deep wide receiving core. I disagree, but let's hear your take about the Detroit Lions and
Yeah,
their
for
wide
sure.
receivers.
So obviously we've got Kenny Golladay as the number one receiver in Detroit. My opinion, top five talent wise fantasy or top wide. My opinion, top five receiver in the league talent wise. I think from an actual standpoint, he's going to catch touchdowns. He's going to get yards. He's going to win you games. With Matthew Stafford under center, Kenny Golladay is going to be extremely solid in real life and fantasy. Then you look at going down, we've got Marvin Jones and Danny Amendola. Danny Amendola is not like going to be the best fantasy productivity, but in the NFL, he does what he needs to do. He's a solid slot receiver. He's a good route runner and pass catcher. He's not going to burn you. He's not going to go off for 100 yards every game. He's going to find the end zone a bit, though, and he's also going to just be a number that you really can't ignore when you're on the field. And then when you look down, you've got Quintez Cephas as a rookie wide receiver who could easily pass Danny Amendola or Marvin Jones as like being that 2 or 3 guy. But then you've got Marvin Hall as well, who is a 4-4 burner little dude. He has the potential to burn quarterbacks at any time. He averaged just over 37 yards as a yard per catch last year, only caught the ball 7 times. But when he caught the ball, it was for deep, and he's going to make sure that safeties are on their toes, thus freeing up space for Kenny G, Marvin Jones, etc. to do their work. I'd say probably ceiling, they could be a top 5 receiving class in the league. Floor, probably top 12. So I got him ranked 8th.
Yeah, so I've got a big beef sort of with
You're cutting
the
out a
wide
little bit.
receivers.
Okay, here we go.
Obviously, Kerryon Johnson, or not Kerryon Johnson, Kenny Golladay. Kerryon Johnson's running back. Kenny Golladay is going to obviously put up numbers. Beyond that, I don't think that they get barely any fantasy production out of anyone on that team. Either it's going to be too like evenly spread, or they're just not going to produce. Especially you've got T.J. Hawkinson at tight end as well, and he's gonna put up numbers. So I mean, really, you can just add him.
And then even if TJ Hawkinson doesn't work out, we've also got Jesse James as a solid backup. I'd say the Detroit Lions receiving core in general is a lot more shaped to win you games in the NFL than it is to produce for you in fantasy, with the exception of Kenny G.
Yeah, and also I'm going to take a shot at you saying that Kenny G is a top 5 talent-wise or anything-wise in the NFL. He's top 10 probably, but there are definitely 5 receivers that produce better in fantasy and are more talented than him.
Talented, no. Fantasy, yes. I'd say talent-wise, you've got Michael Thomas, Devontae Adams, Julio Jones, DeAndre Hopkins, and then Kenny Golladay. I think those are by far the top 5 best receivers. You could make a case for Mike Evans, but I think Kenny Golladay at the end of this year, and honestly right now, is more of a talented receiver than Mike Evans is.
We still consistently overlook Tyler Lockett, but we'll move on.
Tyler Lockett is not a top 5 talent-wise receiver in the league. DK Metcalf, talent-wise, is more talented than Tyler Lockett. Tyler Lockett's just more established.
I think that DK Metcalf could pass Tyler Lockett in talent at some point. I don't think right now he's more talented though.
I think
he's got
more
the physicality.
I think is exactly when I say talent, I'm talking about like physicality and like refinedness. I'd say like when I look at talent, I look at like their actual physicals, like and like ball catching ability and like route running. I think DK Metcalf is better physically, but when we look at actual like precision and like catching ability and route running, Tyler Lockett has him beat. But I'd say DK Metcalf is the better talent-wise receiver right now, just because the physicals outshine them by that much.
All right, we'll move on from the Lions now. I'm sure you've had enough, considering that barely anyone cheers for them anyway. So on to
Detroit.
the
Hey,
on to the
all
next
my
team.
Detroit fans know.
We got the Bears. Quarterback battle. Trubisky, Foles. Who do you have?
Honestly, who cares? Like either they like you know what you're getting from both of these guys. Honestly, their production isn't going to be like that different. They're both going to go out there, throw a couple touchdowns, throw a couple picks. They're not going to be fantasy elite and they're going to struggle winning games, honestly. This Chicago Bears team in my opinion is by far a lot worse than the Detroit Lions this year. So I'd say the Chicago Bears team, their holes how are they going to score the football?
Yeah, that's true. I'm not going to say that their biggest weakness is their quarterback position though.
One of
If
their
they start if they start if they start Nick Foles, I think they'll do fine
one of their
in
biggest
terms of
weaknesses is
in
their
terms
O
of
line. The Chicago Bears had the 25th ranked O line last year, and I don't really see them improving, honestly. And with bad
yeah.
trenches, I think
For me though,
defenses are
for me
going to
though,
eat them up, and they're really going to make whoever's playing at quarterback throw the ball. And I think their receiving core, I mean, Allen Robinson is solid, but after that, you've got Anthony Miller and then Taylor Gabriel. I don't think those are solid enough names to consistently be able to put the ball in the end zone. And I think if the Bears are going to win games, they're going to be low scoring battles where Khalil Mack just shows that he's the best player on the field.
yeah. I think though the biggest weakness you touched on, obviously their offensive line and their wide receivers, but running backs is the biggest weakness for them. Uh, Montgomery and Cohen. Cohen, I like Cohen because he can catch passes out of the backfield, but other than that, he's not going to win them games.
Yeah.
And in terms of fantasy value, he's pretty low.
Hmm.
David Montgomery's also not very high on that list for me.
Yeah. I think
And
Montgomery
really,
is a little underrated, but he's still not that good. And again, it's just in general scoring the ball. Like the offensive line isn't going to do you any favors, and
yeah,
and the running game, unlike in Detroit, isn't going to open up the play action for the receivers to thrive. So that's the Bears defense, though. You can never, honestly, you can't really count out a team if it has Khalil Mack on it. Like, he's that good of a player. He's the top 5 player
yeah.
in the league on both ends.
In terms of fantasy, you're going to be starting one guy and one guy only from the Chicago Bears, and that's going to
Two,
be Allen Robinson.
two, and their defense.
But that's true. That's true. If you, yeah. Fair enough. All
So
right, so we'll move on. We'll move on to the Vikings now. You got Kirk Cousins at quarterback. That's pretty set in stone. Obviously, they did draft Nate Stanley as an Iowa guy. I'm just gonna point that out. He's not gonna play anything, but gotta
I
rep
mean, you
gotta
never
rep
know.
Iowa.
They might get
You
injured.
never, yeah,
I mean, you've
yeah.
got Chad Henne, the Michigan guy, and the Kansas City Chiefs, and if Mahomes goes down, he's the guy there. So like,
True, that's true.
you
Back to the
never know.
Vikings though. You've got Dalvin Cook. He showed up for training camp, so that's a good thing.
The way I
But
look at the Vikings is they're similar to the Bears, except they have slightly better, like in like winning games wise, they have a slightly better offense, but a slightly worse defense.
for me, the Vikings are going to be a team where you're starting of their players on your fantasy team. You're starting Dalvin Cook, you're starting Stephon Diggs, and you're either going to be Kirk Cousins, depending on how he's looking, or their defense.
I'd say late year Justin Jefferson could be,
It could be,
and honestly Adam Thielen too. I'd say Adam Thielen is a good wide receiver 3 flex play.
but not Diggs. I meant Thielen.
Thielen, yeah, okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Diggs
My
is
bad.
on the
I'm
Bills now.
still in. Yeah.
It's
So we're
all good.
gonna play a little clip of last week's episode where Brady said that Devontae Freeman is still on the Falcons
Hey,
and
now
Nick
we're
Foles is
even.
still on the Jaguars. Yeah,
Now
now
we're
now we're
even.
even.
But
Luckily, I'm
anyway,
doing the editing for this episode, so
yeah.
that'll probably all be cut out. Uh,
Nah. So anyway,
if you're on YouTube, we'll just leave it in. But if you're on Spotify, you're not hearing any of this anyway.
okay. So anyway, I don't do any of that. I just record and talk. So again,
Yeah,
anyway, the Vikings, they're gonna win games by putting the ball in the end zone. Dalvin Cook will take over 3 or 4 games this year, 100 to 150 yards, 2 touchdowns. Dalvin Cook is that good of a running back, and the Minnesota Vikings offensive line was 19th ranked last year. However, don't let this fool you because they are I'd say they're a top 10 run blocking line in the league. They're just not good at pass blocking. Like, and that's what
you look at how Dalvin Cook performed last season with that
yeah.
offensive line, and I've got
Exactly.
no issues.
The
I
Minnesota
really don't care
Vikings
about
O
what the
line,
rankings say.
specialize in run blocking. The way they struggle
Yeah.
is is on the passing, but they're good with running. They're good with opening up holes. They're good with zone blocking, all of that. So I don't really see any struggles there. But honestly, I'd say the Vikings are going to be slightly better than the Bears this year. I'd say the Vikings' peak for records is, let's go. Their peak is 9-7 wild card berth. Low is 4-12. You could
don't
say
think
10-6. I'd say
I
peak 10-6.
don't think that they can lose 12 games.
And that's
I
why I
don't think
said
that
on
you
the
can put
lowest.
Yeah, but I don't think that's even a I don't think I think their floor is they lose 10 games or 10 games at the most.
Okay.
You can't put Dalvin Cook, Kirk Cousins, Adam Thielen all on the same team.
On my
Justin
record,
Jefferson too
on my
if he returns from the COVID list.
record prediction, I got my records right here. I've got the Packers at 11-5. I've got the Lions at 9-7. I've got the Vikings at 6-10. So, and then I've got the
What do you have for the
Bears at
Bears
five
at?
and 11.
Okay. So
But
I think the low end of the season, or like a floor sort of situation for the Vikings, would be 6-10.
but
I think that
I've got the
nine and
Detroit
seven is probably
Lions.
accurate.
I've got the Detroit Lions as 9-7, wild card 6 seed.
We'll see. Okay, so now onto the division favorite. We've got the
The Green Bay
Packers,
Packers.
but the Packers have been they've had a few issues in the past few days with Devin Funchess
They
opting
have,
out.
again,
Uh,
the big
the
question in Green Bay, who are they going to throw the ball to? You've got Devontae
yeah,
Adams, but you look at, besides that, I mean, Alan Lazard, Marquez Valdez, Scantling, and Kumaro all look solid on paper, but at the end of the day, they're not proven receivers. Like, you don't know how they play in games. Again, they've
and
all had
honestly,
their moments, but like I don't think they'll be able to consistently produce outside of Devontae Adams, and this could lead to scoring droughts. And when Aaron Rodgers gets mad, he doesn't do well. Aaron Rodgers doesn't do well under anger.
yeah. Well, honestly, this is a reach, but even got to look at who's going to be throwing the ball. I mean, we've had a few things come out about how Aaron Rodgers, has handled them drafting Jordan Love. They moved up to get Jordan Love in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, they're gonna have to pay him a lot to stick around after the season, or even if he doesn't stick around, they're just locked into a deal where they've got to pay him a decent sum of money. So might be looking to deal him out somewhere and just bring in Jordan Love, scratch this season.
That
And
is completely fair. That could easily
obviously,
happen.
yeah,
However, with the Packers, they've got a top 5 offensive line in the league. They've got I got on my notes Corey L. Ellington J. I don't remember their last names, but they've got David Bakhtiari, who is the best left tackle in the league, and having him means that like the pass blocking is going to be there. No one has even come close to him in pass blocking ratings. Like David Bakhtiari is the best offensive tackle in the league, and I think he's going second best offensive lineman in the league behind Quentin Nelson. But I think that like their offensive line is going to be solid. Their run game is going to be solid. Their defense is going to be solid. And I'll touch up on secondaries for all 4 teams in a bit here. But I think that their biggest question is who are they going to throw the ball to. So with records, I got them as a ceiling 14-2. They run the division. The offense is there. Aaron Rodgers is throwing the ball. Lazard, Kumaro, and Scantling all play well, and they're a complete team. Ceiling 14-2, and then the floor I've got 8-8. Wild card 8-8 for the floor,
my
just missing playoffs.
ceiling for the Packers, I got to go with 12-4. I think that none of those guys besides Devontae Adams are going to produce well enough
But again,
to
at the
get them any
ceiling,
farther. Aaron Jones, even as a ceiling though, Aaron Jones will bring them. Aaron Jones and Aaron Rodgers will obviously carry them. Devontae Adams as well, like connection with the Aaron Rodgers, on the ball. But I don't think that they can win 14 games. They're just
okay,
not a team that's built. They don't have the depth.
that's
They
true.
don't have the chemistry really to win 14 games. I don't think.
Okay, that's fair. But I think from your fantasy wise, you're going to be starting Devontae Adams, Aaron Rodgers if he has a really good matchup, and then obviously Aaron Jones. But yeah.
Yeah.
But so anyway, for the ceiling and floor of the Detroit Lions, just because we never touched it, my ceiling for the Lions is 12-4 division winners, and my floor is 4-12. I think that the Lions they have some of the best potential to do really well, but everything could also fall apart.
Yeah, the Lions are definitely the biggest like question mark. You've got a huge potential either for them to do pretty well or pretty terrible. I agree with that. 12-4, that's a good ceiling. 4-12, that's a good floor. I'd maybe even say 3-13 if something
When
happens
you
to
look
Matthew
at the
Stafford again.
Detroit Lions last year, though, every single game that they lost was like very close. Like they weren't getting blown out; they were losing close games consistently.
Yeah,
Like,
that's true. They've got to find a way to finish those games with
and
Matthew
that's
Stafford
that's
being
with
back.
Matthew Stafford.
Yeah, I think that'll help them, but
And then
they've got a
also
huge
a
range of
little
potential.
bit, and then also just looking a little back, and this is like kind of key for the Lions. They signed Chase Daniels as a backup quarterback, who is a big upgrade from who we had at backup quarterback too, because Chase Daniels, as Trubisky's been injured, has been a decent backup, and he's not a Matthew Stafford by any means, but he's a lot more solid than Jeff Driscoll and Drew Blau.
Not going to disagree. Not going to disagree.
So now let's talk about the secondaries a little bit, just to show like how like games will wrap up, and essentially for your fantasy wide receivers that you have, if you match up with any of these teams in the NFC North, how like will you start or sit them? So first of all, let's look at the Green Bay Packers secondary. Now this is extremely tough, because if you've got like, say you've got like a low end wide receiver to a high end wide receiver three, if like they're a wide receiver one on the team, let's look at Stephon Diggs. Say you've got, and this is in theory, I don't think the Bills and Packers even play each other this year, but there are other like wide receiver ones. Keep in mind the wide receiver one is going to be seeing a lot of Jair Alexander. And Jair Alexander is a top 5 cornerback in the league. He is a lockdown cornerback. And so he is going, if you're going against the Packers and your receivers going against the Packers, be very careful of Jair Alexander, because he will shut down receivers.
Good take. Jair Alexander. Yeah,
And
I
then
don't disagree.
lining
I don't think I'm
across,
gonna argue you on many of these.
you're probably going to see Josh Jackson lining across from Jair Alexander, and then Adrian Amos at safety. I mean, this is pretty solid secondary. I'd say borderline top 10. I've got them as 11th, but now second best secondary in the league.
They're also pretty experienced, so I think
Yeah,
they'll
I think
blend a lot better than the Packers offense will.
now when we look at Detroit Lions, their secondary, they have the potential to be a top 5 secondary in the league, but they also have potential to be below 20th, because we've got a bunch of young unproven talent. We've got Jeff Okuda, the third pick in the NFL draft, and it's going to rely on him quite a bit, because if he does well, you could easily see him lining up against wide receiver ones in like a Denzel Ward type role. But, or if he does okay, you could see him lining up against wide receiver twos while Jasmine Trufant takes the one. Or you could even see him lining up against wide receiver threes if he doesn't pan out with the guy out of Penn State who we drafted in the 4th round in the 2019 draft. His Aruweir. I don't know how you pronounce that, but he's solid. So it really all depends on Jeff Okuda. If Jeff Okuda can prove himself to be a lockdown cornerback early, that secondary in Detroit's going to be scary with Jeff Okuda and Desmond Trufant, as well as a good corner in the third guy, who's, I don't know how to pronounce his name. And then we've got Tracy Walker at safety, who is actually the best rated Lions defensive back last year, even over Slay. Like, just like from actual grading, he's going to be back. So the Lions, again, it really relies on how good is Jeff Okuda going to be in the league. And if he's like a stellar cornerback, the Lions could have a sneaky good secondary.
Yeah, so basically, what we're talking about here is the Lions. Everything's got to work for them in order for them to be good. They've got to have all the pieces fall into place correctly,
But
and
I'd say
obviously, a
with
key
Detroit,
component to that is their secondary.
yeah. But again, if you're looking at receivers, matching up against Desmond Trufant is going to be hard, because Desmond Trufant is, I'd say, a fringe top 10 cornerback in the league. He's extremely solid. And so matching up against Desmond Trufant is going to be tough, per se. But here's the thing, though. If you've got like wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3s, the depth of the Detroit Lions secondary is very solid. We've got a bunch of guys who started last year and like will do pretty well, like coming off the bench. So when you've got like the wide receiver 2s, wide receiver 3s, look at like the Michael Gallups of the world, like who could like start like say like you've got CD Lamb and Amari Cooper, and so Michael Gallup will get on a bad corner. Against the Lions, that probably won't happen, meaning that like for the lower end, like wide receiver 2s and 3s on the actual teams themselves, I'd say like veer them away from the Lions.
Good insight.
So now let's look at the Chicago Bears secondary. They've got Eddie Jackson and Kyle Fuller, who are both pretty solid, but the big hole in the Chicago Bears secondary is their slot corner. You really have no idea. They don't really have good slot corner production. So you see slot receivers, even look at Danny Amendola. He would torch the Chicago Bears just based on matchups alone, because any good slot receiver will torch the Chicago Bears. So when you got like the fast, smaller guys in the slot, those receivers are huge pluses to start against Chicago.
They can account for some of that with, different schemes on their defense. Putting a linebacker over the middle where you can cover those slot routes. So I don't think that the portrayal that Danny Amendola is gonna burn the Chicago Bears defense. I don't
Like
think that's
he
accurate.
matches up well
They
against
might
them.
they might struggle. Might struggle against like the best of the best in terms of slot
And
receivers.
I was using Danny Amendola as like a positive matchup. Danny Amendola isn't going to torch any team. Danny Amendola isn't the reason why the Lions are going to win football games. But like I'm saying, like solid slot receivers against the Bears, like a good slot receiver will be the reason why the Chicago Bears lose probably 2 or 3 games this year.
Yeah, that's fair. And also, you look at a similar situation. If they can't cover like slot routes, then they're gonna have a tricky time handling tight ends as well.
Exactly.
In a similar sort of situation.
I'd say, except
That'll
because
be
Khalil Mack, he's a pass rush linebacker. Sure, he covers fine, but the reason he's elite is because he can get to the quarterback.
exactly. Yeah. He's not a contributor to that pass defense like some other linebackers can be.
Now with the Minnesota Vikings, this is a huge hole in their team. They've lost a lot of talent at secondary, and they have probably the most uncertain secondary in the league. So like it's really hard to rank them this far back because you just essentially don't know who's going to be starting. So right now, if I had to say right now, I'd say that if you got a receiver going against the Vikings, you should lean to start them just because of the uncertainty there and the fact that like the chemistry isn't there.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are my takes. Again, Carter, do you have any specific records? Like, how do you think is going to win the division? How many teams do you think they're going to get into the playoffs? Like wrapping up the NFC North.
So my take, if I had to choose, if I'm sitting here, I'm thinking about who's gonna win the NFC North. Obviously, we talked about Packers; they're supposed to be good. Talked about the Lions; they could be good. I'm still taking the Vikings. The Vikings are gonna win the NFC North because the Packers are gonna struggle. Obviously, I mean, I talked about taking Aaron Rodgers, back in the mock draft. He might play well. He's gonna be consistent. I took him as a backup, so like, there's obviously I had some room to work with him there. But I still think that the Vikings they've got the best offense, not necessarily the best offense, but between Dalvin Cook and Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson, this is assuming that Justin Jefferson recovers from being on the COVID list and comes back and plays well with them. I think that they surprise the division and win it with the Lions. You've convinced me of the Lions. I think that there's a chance they could be the wild card coming out of that division, or the Packers, either one. Obviously, the Bears are going to finish last, unless if something goes horribly wrong for the Lions.
Yeah,
Which
it very well could be. We are Detroit.
It could. Yeah.
So it probably will happen if we're being real.
Yeah. It's a difficult division to predict, which is why I'm going with the Vikings. Fantasy wise, you want to go with the Packers in terms of the most. That's going to be the team you're starting the most guys from.
I think Kenny Golladay is going to be the best fantasy player in this division, but that's just me.
I think it's
actually no, Dalvin Cook then Kenny G.
I would also take Aaron Jones.
That's where I disagree.
All day, but yeah, that's a closer one than Dalvin Cook.
Yeah, I forgot about Cook for a second. But yeah, so my pick, I personally think the Packers are going to win the division. I think that team is extremely solid. Their really only holes are at wide receiver. But again, the holes aren't as deep as other teams. When you look at the Detroit Lions, their D-line is, again, a huge question mark. If the Okora brothers can get to the quarterback, which they very well could, if Trey Flowers can get to the quarterback, they could be very good, but they could also be very bad. Again, because I'm a Lions hopeful, I've got us at 9-7, getting the 6th seed. But at the end of the day, I think the Green Bay Packers are the most complete team in this division. They're the most established team in this division. And even though the Vikings have a solid offense, I think that defensive secondary is going to lose them quite a few games. And I think that's the big hole in their team. Also, being able to throw the ball. I don't know, I don't think the Vikings are going to be able to throw the ball very well with the loss of Diggs. Also that O line, they're not very good at pass blocking. I got the Vikings at 6-10 out of the playoffs. I've got the Packers at 11-5, winning the division, getting a 3 or 4 seed, and I've got the Detroit Lions at 9-7, getting the 6th seed, and then the Chicago Bears at 5-11, heading up the rear. So
we'll leave it at that.
Yeah. So
We're gonna
again,
move on now to college players. We're
Debbie,
gonna look at
guys.
some of the top prospects for the 2021
Now
draft.
again,
If you're a dynasty or a Devi player, you want to stick around for this section. So
if you're a regular
we're
fantasy
taking a look at
footballer, this is goodbye. Unless you want to hear us talk about talent coming out next year, because there are quite a few interesting names.
if you wanna stick around to see who you're gonna be drafting, probably 5th or 6th round next year in place of where you're drafting Jonathan Taylor this year, you can stick around for this. All right, so we got a decent running back class coming out of between Chuba Hubbard and Najee Harris and Travis Etienne.
I think Jarrett Patterson coming out of Buffalo is also going to be. He's probably the most slept on running back in this draft. I think Jarrett Patterson is going to be extremely solid fantasy wise in college football and just like draft wise. I think Jarrett Patterson is going to make a lot of waves in this year.
In addition, you've also got a guy like Kylan Hill coming out of Mississippi State.
Yep.
I think
when you look further up, you've got Bryant Koback coming out of Toledo. He's ranked, I'd say RB2 for college, but he could make a lot of waves. Or RB, like an RB2, not as in the second best RB. Actually, according to here, Jarrett Patterson, who I'm pretty high on already, is the second best running back fantasy-wise coming out of college. But I think Jarrett Patterson is going to be extremely solid. You look at Master Teague coming out of Ohio State. The Ohio State running back, as a Michigan fan, it pains me to say this, they're always going to be pretty solid.
Yeah. For wide receivers for me, so you've got Rashad Bateman. If he decides to go to the draft after this season, he's my top guy. Rashad Bateman out of Minnesota. He's one of the biggest reasons that Minnesota played as well as they did last year, and that was an insane run for Minnesota. When you look at how their program has been, it's been a bit it's been terrible, but they really figured it out last season, and I think that Rashad Bateman is a pretty decent component to that success.
I like him a lot. I like Jamar Chase out of LSU a little more, though. I think that he's going to be extremely solid this year. And then you look at Sage Surratt coming out of Wake Forest. In my opinion, the best college fantasy receiver this year. I think he should be the number one receiver going off boards in the actual college leagues. However, when you look at actual drafts, maybe not as high. I'd say, in my opinion, Jamar Chase is going to be the best. But Sage Surratt coming out of Wake Forest, I think is going to be extremely solid and arguably the wide receiver 1 for college this year.
The issue with a wide receiver out of Wake Forest is that you look at their quarterback last year, Jamie Newman. Well, he's at Georgia now, so you've got an issue where you're getting a new quarterback. How are they going to do?
That is fair.
You've got issues all through the offseason. Obviously, not issues at Wake Forest, but you have issues with just the world in terms of coronavirus. So you don't really know how that QB transition is going to go. And talking about Jamie Newman, I think that Jamie Newman is going to be very good at Georgia, and I think that he's gonna improve his draft stock versus where it was coming out of Wake Forest. I think that transfer really helps him out in terms of the NFL draft and eventually fantasy drafts.
Now, going up the board here, this is always looked over, but you got to realize Hawaii's offense, Hawaii consistently throws the ball essentially the most out of anyone in college football. So the best receiver or the wide receiver 1 on Hawaii is going to be extremely good fantasy wise, even if they're not that good in NFL wise, just because sheerly of how much they throw the ball. So Jared Smart is a name to look out for in the college fantasy football scene. You've also got Jalen Waddle out of Alabama. I mean, say less. He's going to be extremely solid just because of the system he comes from. And then you've got Wandale Robinson coming out of Nebraska. He's got Adrian Martinez, who's actually very solid quarterback. I could see him making some waves in the college fantasy football scene too.
Adrian Martinez is not a solid quarterback. Then
I'd
no
say
one
he's top
coming out
20,
of
and
no one.
I would say Adrian Martinez is top 20.
I'm not even sure that I could name you 20 starting college quarterbacks, but I could probably name you 20 that are better than Adrian Martinez.
I don't think you could. On this site, he's ranked at 14th. So that's just my thought.
Don't trust that site. I mean, as much as it pains me to say, Brock Purdy is a better quarterback than AJ. Like, I don't like Brock Purdy at all.
Brock Purdy's a top 5 quarterback this year, fantasy wise.
He should not be. He cannot. Look at Iowa State. They've had decent talent, I'd say, surrounding him. Obviously not good, but like it's decent for Iowa State.
Okay, but look at me. I'm a Michigan fan, and I recognize that Justin Fields is the best fantasy quarterback like coming out of this college.
Yeah, but there's a difference because Justin Fields is gonna beat you guys. Brock Purdy has not done.
Is gonna beat you guys.
He's not.
He will. But in my opinion, my big sleeper quarterback, well, not sleeper, but quarterback who I think will perform the best, I've got De'Aaron King out of Miami. I think at Houston, I think the transfer is going to help him a lot, and I think he's really going to shine at Miami. Then you've got Holton Ahlers from East Carolina University. I think he's going to be pretty solid too, coming in at 12th ranked. I think he's going to be an name to look out for. And then we've got KJ Costello coming out of Mississippi State. I think he's going to be extremely solid this year, maybe having him shoot up. And then, last but not least, for my quarterback's perspectives, you can't forget about Trevor Lawrence, the best prospect coming out of this draft. Consensus number 1 quarterback prospect-wise. I got him top 10 fantasy-wise in quarterbacks. I think there are better quarterbacks than him. For example, like Sam Ellinger, like Sam Howell, the two Sams. But Trevor Lawrence is the best quarterback to come out of this, and in my opinion, has the most NFL potential. If you're drafting Dynasty right now, I'd say you draft Trevor Lawrence, and then you draft Chuba Hubbard coming out of Oklahoma State, because I think that these are the two best guys coming out, and you should draft in dynasty leagues.
I want to clarify something here. You were saying that Sam Ellinger and Sam Howell are better fantasy quarterbacks in college.
Yeah,
they're going to be in the NFL.
No, in college. In college, like this year in college, from college production. No. I'd say so.
Trevor Lawrence, he is so versatile, dude. I don't watch many.
Yeah, except
ACC games,
you also have to realize Travis Etienne is going to get a lot of work too. Like them running backs from Texas and UNC.
That doesn't matter. You look at, just go back and watch the college football playoff and look at Trevor Lawrence.
But again, here's the reason why. But you gotta
insane, dude.
He's insane, sure, but Sam Ellinger, Sam Howell, they're gonna go out, they're gonna throw touchdowns, and I'd say more stat-wise, pure stat-wise, more than Trevor Lawrence. However, prospect-wise, no. Trevor Lawrence is gonna win more games, but stat-wise, when we're looking at pure stats, no.
Look at who they have to play. They get to play Miami, they get to play Florida State, they get to play Duke, they get to play all these cupcake games. Dude,
Speaking of which, I think my big prediction, I think Miami's going to beat Clemson this year. I think Miami's beating Clemson this year. I think De'Aaron King.
If anyone is going to beat Clemson, it's going to be North Carolina.
I think Miami's going to beat Clemson this year. I think De'Aaron King is the real deal. I think Miami's going to be a solid team, but I think that De'Aaron King is going to shine against Clemson, and I think he's going to torch them.
No, there's no way, dude.
Nah. Again, big sleeper prediction. Say we look and say Clemson rolls Miami. Okay, cool. That's why it's a sleeper prediction. But say why Miami goes and wins that game, then who's looking like a genius?
Yeah, except here's the thing, though. You look at Miami, they've been struggling real bad. I mean, their quarterback position has been a revolving door, essentially.
And now they've got De'Aaron King, who's a solid top 10 quarterback in college football.
Yeah, but I'm not sure that's gonna fit. I mean, Tate Martell, he was a pretty decent.
Tate Martell sucks.
He was, in terms of how people were looking at him, comparable to De'Aaron.
You can't compare Tate Martell to De'Aaron King.
In terms of when they both announced that they were gonna go to Miami, look at like how they were viewed, I'd say obviously King is he's better. He's viewed as a better player, but it wasn't too far off. They neither of them are like your best quarterback in the country sort of situation.
I'd say Derek King has potential to be the best quarterback in the country. I'd say he's a very
There's
sleeper
no
Heisman
way.
pick. He's
There's
he's one of my
there's
favorite quarterbacks in college football, and yeah, I think he's going to be very solid this year. I
you've got Justin Fields, you've got Trevor Lawrence, you've got Jamie Newman, you've got even uh
Derek King can beat you with his arm. He can beat you on the ground. Like I think he's going to be extremely solid. And
so can Trevor Lawrence.
but
Have
I'm
you
saying no,
seen
but
the man
Derek King,
run?
I've seen the man run, but Derek King is a lot more mobile than Trevor Lawrence.
Did you watch the college football playoffs? Did you watch the college football
Have you
playoffs?
watched Derek King play?
Yeah, I think I have.
Yeah, I've watched Clemson play too. Like I watched the college
Yeah.
football playoffs, and I'm saying Trevor Lawrence is like a better quarterback. Like I'd say like prospect wise, but like for actual stat wise and like Heisman Trophy wise, I think Trevor Lawrence is still going to win that. But I think Derek King has potential to get that, and like has higher potential than essentially not anybody else, but like extreme sleeper potential. Like if like you like let's look at Derek King's Heisman odds. I would put $5 on that if I could legally gamble, but I can't, so that's tough.
I I'm gonna say I'm thinking it's more likely a wide receiver wins the Heisman than Derek King.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, 100% more likely that a wide receiver wins it.
No, definitely
Yeah.
not. I think Derek King is the real deal. I think he's going to show that this year. And yeah, that's just me.
All right, guys. Well, you've sat through us arguing about stuff for long enough, so thanks for
Hey,
listening.
but again,
It's
we
me and Brady with the No Prep Fantasy Football, No Prep Fantasy on Twitter. Find us at Crimson Nexus and V3 Brady on Twitter. At YouTube, it's obviously No Prep Fantasy Football. You can go check out Variety 3 as well. Brady and some of his buddies do that. It's not anything football related, but it's
it's just
a
fun
pretty cool
stuff.
group of guys. Yeah, just kind of messing around.
Hmm.
Um, Other than that, I hope that we didn't bore you to sleep or anything like that.
Again,
Uh,
next episode, probably the same kind of structure as this, maybe analyzing a mock or maybe analyzing two different divisions. We'll essentially leave that up to y'all and our own decision because let's be real, y'all aren't going to comment. But you should though. But
yeah.
anyway, but
Thank you to the four. I think between YouTube and Spotify, listenership of 5 people. I think
hey, but
because
stuff doesn't blow up off the dome. Like you got to
yeah,
put time into it.
exactly. Yeah. So we're the goal is once the season starts, we're gonna start breaking down. So I've got a few leagues that I joined, and we're gonna set lineups
Mhm.
while we're recording, and there'll be more player specific debates. Obviously, we've been doing that already, as you can see.
Yeah.
The mock draft was, I mean, we'll sit there and argue Trevor Lawrence versus Derek King, even though it's a clear and obvious choice
Yeah,
which one's
Derek
better.
King.
And that was, but
Stat wise, Trevor Lawrence is a better prospect.
anyways,
Derek King has better stats.
that's what you can expect during the season. Preseason though, we're just kind of throwing things together,
Yep.
just arguing as much as we can because
We'll
that's
be
what's
breaking
fun.
down every single
Yes,
division in football in depth before the season starts, as well as
that is the
records
hope.
and playoff predictions. And then, yeah, I hope y'all liked and make sure to tune in to the next episode. Hopefully, Tom will be back, but you never know. But
Yeah,
again, at the end of the day, me and Carter just do this because couple teenage guys who just like fantasy football a lot, and we do this to have fun. And honestly, it just increases our knowledge like on the game, and just like being able to listen to somebody else's perspective. So even if it like doesn't blow up and get views, it helps like me wrap my head around situations and gives me and it gives me someone to bounce my ideas off of.
and most of them are terrible ideas, so he needs to keep bouncing.
I predicted Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson in 2018 and 2019.
All right.
I
Well,
don't think that's a terrible idea.
I took Tom Brady in the second round of a fantasy draft and still got second place in the league. So
The fact that
I'm
you
gonna
took
take him in a
Tom Brady in
fantasy.
the second round of a fantasy
Yeah.
draft,
Well, but here's the thing.
you're listening to this guy, the guy who
Yeah, but
took Tom Brady in the second round, opposed to the
but
guy who took Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson back
to be
to
clear,
back.
that was a few years ago, and also to be clear, I got second place in the league still. So
Yeah,
I think that showcases my recovery skills
yeah,
pretty
fair,
well.
fair enough. But
Uh,
again, we're
so
just here for the personality, and I mean, we go in depth. Like we probably go more in depth in about fantasy football, and honestly, we probably know more about fantasy football than like 95% of the people in like our age group, and probably a solid 90% of like everyone who plays fantasy football, just because like we know life
we
it.
think.
So
We think.
yeah, definitely of our
Of
age
course.
group, the
When
90
Brady still thinks that Devontae Freeman's on the
90,
Falcons,
and
that
when
makes
you
me
think
question everything.
Stephon Diggs is on the Vikings still, that makes me
No,
question everything.
that was just me misspeaking.
Yeah, and
All
that was
right.
just me misspeaking too.
No, because you did it. All right. Well, anyway, tweet at us.
Yep.
Or NoPrep Fantasy.
We'll answer
Comment
all
on
your
YouTube.
questions because like
Yes,
we're big enough to where we can actually respond to you.
exactly.
Okay, not big. But yeah. Peace out everyone. Have a good one. Make sure to stay safe and make sure to tune in next time. Peace out.